Hi everybody, today we're looking at legs. We'll also discuss knees and feet and ankles. We're going to stretch all of those areas and do some self-massage in all of those areas. So to start with, we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up, get some blood flowing, so we can start with a little bit of a jog on the spot, or if you're not into jogging, you can do a bit of marching. Try and bring those knees up fairly high if you can. If you warm the muscles up, get some blood flowing, you'll get a better stretch. Okay, and we can do a bit more of that jogging. We can flick the feet out in front of us and flick them out behind us and out to the sides. Okay, and if all that's a little bit bouncy for you, you can do it without the bouncy. Okay, and we're going to do some leg swings. Now, if you need to, you can hold on to something, so use a windowsill or a chair or something. But generally, if you bring the opposite arm forward with your leg, it helps improve your balance, and doing this is really good for your balance anyway. So straight leg as it comes forward, bend the knee as it goes back. That will give the quad through the front of the thigh a little bit of a stretch. And then swapping, doing the other side. Opposite arm comes forward with the leg. Helps to push into your big toe. Push into your big toe, and that will help your balance. Also finding something to focus on and not shifting your focus. Okay, I'm going to do some climbing over the stile, I call it. So you can bring the leg out to the side and back into the centre. Works through the whole hip area as well. And a lot of your thigh muscles attach on the pelvis, so warming up through the whole pelvic area is great when you're focusing on loosening up through your legs. Okay, so now we're going backwards, coming forward, and going around the back. You may get a few clinks and clonks. That's fine, it's usually tight tendons flicking over each other. Okay, so we've done that. We're going to do the adductors. The adductors are the inner thigh. Adduct means to bring together, and they're the muscles that bring the legs together. So take a nice wide stance. If this is too wide, you'll go in closer. If you're quite tight, you will stay quite upright. The idea is to feel a good stretch on the inner thigh. If you're not getting enough stretch in this position, keeping a straight back, you can come forward. You're bending at the hips, you're not rounding the back at all. And if it's easier, you can have hands on your knees. And you're going at a nice steady pace. We're dynamic stretching, so we are getting blood flowing as opposed to static stretching when you're still. Okay. And then bringing those legs in together and do some heel raises. So you can use your arms if you like. You're bringing the arms up, breathing in, coming onto the toes, breathing out, coming back down. Breathing in, coming up, breathing out, coming down. A couple more of those. Again, helps to focus on something. And coming back down, and we're going to do some knees up. So you can bring the knee to the opposite hand, or you can bring the knee to the opposite elbow if you want to work in a little more deeply. And then we're going to do hand to opposite heel. If you can't get your foot up that high, that's fine. You just wave your arm in the general direction of your foot. Okay, and then just for a little bit of mixing it up, front, front, back, back, front, front, back, back, front, back, back. Okay, and we're going into a downward facing dog. So we have the hands forward, hips high, and walking the heels down one at a time. Stretch through the calf muscles. You may also feel it in your hamstrings. And walk the hands and feet back and curling, coming back up. So it's a nice little routine to do if you're going for a walk or a run, or if you're just going to do some stretching, which is what we're doing now. So knees. Knees are a hinge joint like the elbow. They only go forward and back. They don't rotate like your shoulders and your hips do. Knees do not like a lot of lateral movement. They don't. If I do that, that's coming from my hip joint. It's not my knee doing that. The front of the thighs are your quads, your quadricep muscles. 3 attach on the upper thigh and below the knee. The 4th one attaches on the hip and then below the knee. The 4th one is harder to stretch because it's crossing 2 joints. Then we have hamstrings round the back. They bring the heel towards the buttock. The quads bring straighten the leg. So when you're kicking a ball, you are using your quads. The adductors, as I mentioned before, bring the thighs together. And then we have abductors, which means to take away, on the outer thigh, but they're predominantly your gluteal muscles. There's another little muscle in here, your TFL does some abduction as well. They take the legs away. So we need to address all of those areas because it's an imbalance in length and strength of opposing muscles that generally causes a lot of muscular issues. So quads, most of you have done this before, so you can hold on to something if you like, but again, really good for your balance not to use anything to hold. And you're trying to bring your heel as close to your buttock as it will go. At the same time, you want to be as straight through the front of the groin as possible. If I'm bent, I'm going to lose a lot of stretch. So I'm going to squeeze my right buttock, I'm holding my right heel, and I'm staying as straight and tall as possible. Okay, we'll do the same on the other side. So you're going to bring foot up towards the heel. Now if you can't get up there, you can use a chair. And you can place your foot on the chair and then turn yourself around and drop into the stretch. You can also use something to wrap around your ankle, like a belt, and take hold of that and work on pulling the belt up higher until you can get the leg in the right position. Let's get that right out of the way. Okay, so another way of doing quad stretch, you can come down on the ground. This is good for when you're watching telly. You can bring that heel right up to you. It's much easier to get the leg up in this position, and then you can focus on trying to get it straight. So you're still getting much the same stretch, you're just reclining. Now if you'd like to increase the stretch further, you can roll over onto your tummy and do it in this position. In this position, the front of the hip will be really nice and straight, so you will get the best stretch of the 3. If you can't get your foot up to you in a lying position, then start lying on your side and then bring the foot up. Okay, so that's going to help out the quad muscles. If you are getting knee pain, and your knee pain is very central, particularly in under here, it can be due to very tight quads, because as the muscle shortens, it will pull on the tendon attachments in here. So obviously you can have knee joint issues where there is some sort of deterioration, damage or injury inside the joint, but knee pain can be purely muscular as well. And the little kneecap here is held in position by the tendons that come around from the legs, and if they're all out of kilter, then that can cause a lot of issues with your kneecap. Okay, we've got adductors, inner thighs. So sitting like so, sitting up nice and tall. If you can't sit up nice and tall and you feel as though you're slumped back here, it'll be because your hamstrings are too tight, and you will need either a little yoga block. Phone book always used to be good, but people don't have those so much anymore. Okay, or your folded blanket, and then you can come forward. You come forward as far as you need to get that stretch on the inner thigh. If you are getting inner knee pain through here, it can be because of tight adductors. We have long adductors which attach in here below the knee, and we have short adductors. So we have to do two different types of stretches for adductors. So you can come forward, you can also come over one leg. That'll get into adductor a bit, but also hamstring. And you can go adductor on the other side, and if you want to get into low back as well, you can bring an arm over. I'm just going through all of these stretches once today, but it's a really good idea to do 2 or 3 times each side. Short adductors, they attach above the knee, so from the pubic bone to above the knee. Long adductors go from the pubic bone to below the knee. To get short adductors, you can bring the soles of your feet together and use your elbows to push those legs down. So very important to do the short adductors and the long adductors, because if you don't, you can still stay tight in one of those groups of muscles, and they can still cause pain and restriction. Okay, so that's one way of doing the short adductors. Another way is to come onto hands and knees, hips on your heels, keep your big toes together, take your knees as far apart as they'll go, and then walk your hands forward. So you may only get a little way if you're quite tight, and if you're not so tight, you may be able to get your forehead down, or you can just rest your head in your hands. You should be feeling that on the inner thighs, and if you're not, you might need to take your knees further apart. Okay, so coming up from that, we're also going to look at hamstrings. We did that on the glute video, but I'm going to do that again now anyway. So hamstrings, several ways of doing it. I'll try doing lying down to start with. So if you're tight, knees up, feet in close to the buttocks, bring the leg up. You may find your legs back here a bit. Take hold of your leg. If you need to, you can use a strap or something. Try and get that knee straight. If you can easily get your leg up, then you can straighten the other leg to increase the stretch. If you're straightening out this other leg, try and keep that down. If it's sitting up in the air, it means you've got very tight hip flexors, so they need a good stretch, which is on the glute video. Okay, so we can do adductors both sides like that, and again, either knee up or leg straight, depending on how tight you are. Now we can also do long and short adductors in this position. So to do the long adductors, you can drop both legs as far apart as they'll go. You can support them with your hands if you like underneath, or you can encourage them to drop further down with your hands that way. I could also lie with my legs up on the wall or the side of the bed or something, so I don't have to hold my legs with my hands. And to get my short adductors, I can bring the soles of my feet together, drop my knees out. If you're lying in bed reading your book, you can do this, and the weight of the bedclothes pushes the knees down a little more. If that's too uncomfortable, you can do one leg at a time, particularly if you find your legs are very tight. Okay, so that's adductors and hamstrings. We've done quads. We're just going to address the fourth quad, your rectus femoris muscle that attaches on the front of the hip and comes down. So to get into that one, you need a pillow or a blanket. And you're going to place your knee on something soft, your leg up on a bed or a couch is really good, and then getting this front leg so that it's at 90 degrees. You don't want the foot too far forward and you don't want it too far back. So vertical shin, and if I tuck that right buttock under further, often push it with my other hand, bring the right arm up and over. Should get a really good stretch through the front of the thigh, and you're also getting into your hip flexors. Very important that your knee is comfortable in this position. I do find if that is too hard on the knee, if you come further forward but keep your back very straight and squeeze your buttock, you also get into there as well, but not quite as effective. So swapping sides. We've got that nice vertical shin again. I'm going to squeeze my buttocks, push the hips forward, try and get nice and flat through the front of that thigh, bringing the other arm up and over. Now obviously if you're a lot tighter in those muscles, you will bring your pillow further forward so that your leg isn't at such an extreme angle. Okay. There is a little wee muscle called your tensor fascia latae, and it's kind of that size and shape, and it sits there. So if I was a gunslinger, it would be where my little holsters are before I shoot. It comes down into something called your iliotibial band, which is a big flat tendon that attaches on the outer knee. If your TFL is sore and tight, or if your glutes, particularly glute medius and minimus, are tight, then you can get pain down the outer leg and into the knee. Your iliotibial band, that flat tendon, can be quite sore as well. You will most effectively address your ITB by loosening off your TFL and your glutes, because the tendon has no stretch. So if it's tight, it's generally because the muscles are short and tight and often very sore. And so loosen those off, make them feel better. They'll stop yanking away on your ITB. To get into TFL is quite tricky just because of its location and the fact it's crossing two joints. So a lot of people stretch it like so. I'm stretching the back leg and bring the arm over, and you push your hips forward a bit. The only problem with that is I'm sort of holding myself up while I'm trying to stretch. Whereas if you use something to lean on, something more stable than this chair, because it's likely to shoot out from under me, take my leg back and I can drop my weight more effectively into that leg now. So I'm stretching the right leg, I'm stretching my right TFL, that's where I'm feeling it. My left leg is bent, my right leg is straight, and I'm resting on the outside of my foot. That way I'm getting the whole leg rather than having it flat. So again, you can take that leg over, and you have to play around with this one a bit. I find some people need to go further forward, some need to go more sideways. Just play around with it. Now if that one doesn't work for you, you can do it on your hands and knees. So I'm going to stretch the right side. I'll take my right leg back. I'll take it across the left as far as I can go, and I'm resting on the top of and side of my foot. And then I'm dropping my weight into my right hip. Sometimes you need to come further forward or move around with your hands. Just find that stretch. We'll try that the other side. Take the left leg back over to the right as far as it will go, and drop into your hip. So that's a stretch for your tensor fasciae latae and iliotibial bands. Have a look on a muscle chart if you think I sound like I'm speaking mumbo jumbo. If you look at muscles and see the way they run, it gives you a much better understanding as to how to stretch them. Okay, so we've done all sides of the thighs. We're going to have a look now at the calf. Before I do that, I'll just reiterate, anterior knee pain can come from tight quads. Lateral knee pain can come from a tight iliotibial band, TFL and glutes. Medial knee pain can come from your adductors. And the one I didn't mention, posterior knee pain, generally comes from hamstrings, sometimes glutes. Okay, so loosening off all those muscles will often help out your poor old knees. So calves, we have anterior calves. Our tibialis anterior brings the feet up, does that. Then you have your posterior calf muscles, and they are the ones that are now going to push me up to standing. So they do heel raises. Okay, and then the ones in the front bring the foot up. Then we have muscles down the sides of the leg, and the tendons of those muscles wrap in underneath your foot, and they do that action. And then we have muscles deep in under the bone here that come down, and again some of them wrap in underneath the foot, and they bring the foot in the other way. So we have muscles that go that way, muscles that go that way, muscles that go that way. There is not a lot of muscle in the foot. There are muscles which lift your toes and muscles that scrunch your toes, but most of your foot movement comes from your calf. Okay, so shin splints. Most people say they have shin splints. Very few people actually splinter their shins. A lot of downhill running and army boots might do it. Generally, it's very tight tibialis anterior, and it's a muscle that doesn't often get stretched. So with this one, if you're a bit like you're doing ballet, you're going to rest on the tops of your toes. So move around so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I've got my toes, tops of my toes are on the mat, And I'm going to bend the other leg and drop some weight into that right leg. And you should be feeling that up through the front of the leg. You'll probably feel it more over the ankle where the tendon is, but that will help to stretch it. We'll do the same thing the other side. This doesn't work if you have shoes on. The things that will really aggravate this muscle are slip-on shoes. Jandal, flip-flop type things, really bad. Gumboots are bad. Floppy slippers are bad, because when you're wearing that sort of footwear, you hold your foot up. Otherwise, if you walk properly in jandals, you walk right out of them. So if you are getting very tight through here, have a look at your footwear. The other thing is people who start running, and particularly if they haven't done any for a while, or they start doing a lot of hill running, you hold your foot up more when you run. You hold it up even more going uphill, and it's not a big muscle. It can get very tight and very sore. So stretching it out is good. Another way you can try it is holding onto your foot, and that will also give that muscle a bit of a stretch. You can do this standing or sitting. Okay, that's front of the shins. The muscles that go out this that bring your foot that way, you often damage those when you sprain an ankle. So getting work right the way up to the knee is quite important with a sprained ankle. We'll often see people with very sore, tight peroneus muscles up the outside of the leg here that haven't been addressed. So you just go on the side of the foot. Not the most satisfactory of stretches, but it helps a little. Some muscles it's really hard to get a really good stretch in. And the ones that bring the foot in are even harder to stretch. They're very difficult, and I find you're better just to get in and give those good massage. Posterior calves, we have gastrocnemius attaches above the knee, and soleus or soleus, depending how you say it, attaches below the knee. So these need two different types of stretches. To get your gastroc, you do a straight leg stretch. So you can either get into a downward facing dog, or you can use a wall or a piece of furniture, and you're going to try and get that back leg as close, the heel as close to the floor as possible. It doesn't matter whether it's on or off the heel, off the floor, sorry. It's more about whether or not you're feeling the stretch. So that will get your gastroc. Your gastrocnemius and your soleus both feed into your Achilles tendon. So if you have Achilles tendon issues, you need to address the muscles. Generally, unless you have direct trauma to the tendon, any tendon soreness is because the muscles are so tight and are pulling on the tendon. So if you address the muscles, the tendon should settle, provided it's not too aggravated. Okay, so that's how you get your gastroc. Soleus, you can do much the same thing, but keep the leg bent. However, a lot of people don't find that's an effective stretch. Another way of doing it is putting your foot up something and then bending the knee. And depending what you've got your foot on, this isn't working so well for me, you will get a calf stretch. The knee must be bent. Doing it straight will only get gastroc again. My favourite soleus stretch is to come down into a crouch, and I'm going to place my left foot just behind my right knee and my arms on that knee, and I'm dropping my weight into my arm, into the arms and into the knee. At the same time, I'm dropping my buttocks back towards my heels. With this, it doesn't matter if your heel is off the mat or on the mat. What matters is whether or not you're getting a stretch. And you can usually notice a difference between a gastroc and a soleus stretch. soleus is generally lower down by the Achilles tendon. Okay, do the other side. Same thing, I've got my foot close to my other knee. You need to play around with this. You may need your foot further forward, you may need it further back. You can reach forward, drop your head, stretch your back at the same time. Okay, so that concludes our leg stretching. I will do a separate video that goes through the massaging for the legs, so that if you want to just focus on the massaging, you can do that on its own, or you can just do the stretching. Ideally, you'll do both, because if you get that muscle nicely stretched and warmed up and massaged, it will be a lot more effective. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much. Bye.